get out of trying to think of something to say. But in actuality, it's our own Dr. Jim.
Thank you very much. The title of my speech today is What Does God Look Like? So, if I can't turn this room into an angry bunch of bitter folks by the time I'm done, I have not done my job. By the way, it's a 68-minute speech.
Gotcha.
So, a couple years ago, I was doing something. Who knows? It was a couple years ago, right? And a thought popped into my head. And I did what I do with most thoughts that pop into my head. I ignored it. But this thought wouldn't go away. It just kept hanging out there. And the thought was a very simple question. And the question was, hey, what does God look like? Now, the world can actually be divided up into three groups of people. One group is a group called atheists. And atheists believe that there is no God. Perfectly okay. The second group is, help me out with my vocabulary here.
Agnostic?
Agnostic. Thank you very much. Agnostics. And agnostics say, I've got no idea whatsoever. The information that's available to me is very confusing. I can't say whether there is a God, but at the same point in time, I can't say that there's not a God. So I choose not to make a decision. And the third group is what's called theists. And theists are people who believe in 1,000 different ways that there is some sort of God. Fine. So if you're atheist or agnostic, this speech isn't really going to mean very much. But if you're a theist, I pose to you the question, what does God look like? Now, most formal religions deal with a series of questions such as what you should be doing. And they also deal with another set of questions, what you should not be doing. Sometimes they deal with good stuff like, hey, what happens when this life is done? Where do you go next? These are fantastic questions. These are important questions that should be answered. But none of the formal religions that I'm aware of really spend a lot of time dealing with what does God look like? Well, so when this question came up, I had to think about it a little bit. What kind of inputs do I have? Well, I don't really have an awful lot of inputs. If you take a look at the traditional Western Bible, it indicates that God showed up on earth in, let's say, two forms. The first one was a burning bush, right? So it's a bush that's burning but not being consumed. Okay, well there you go. That's what God looks like. Fantastic. Great. That's swell. Fire hazard to have in any house. The other time he showed up like a dove. I always sort of picture God as being a little bit larger than that, but I'm all cool with that. Every time you see a pigeon, poof, that's God. Is that how that? Well, okay. So I wasn't really comfortable with these visualizations of God. So I thought about it a little bit more. The cool thing is if you've ever seen any Renaissance paintings, you know exactly what God looks like. What does God look like?
An old man.
He's an old man. What kind of hair does he have?
Long.
Long hair. And he's oftentimes reaching out to touch us, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool. God looks like my grandfather. That is fantastic. I was pretty comfortable with that. God looks like us. And in fact, I think there's even some religious teachings that say, hey, we were created in God's image, right? Well, fantastic. But, I'm an engineer. And so, that engineering side sort of eventually pops in. So God looks like an old man. Fantastic. That's wonderful. How old is God? I don't know. God has always existed. Cool. God's always existed. I'm cool with that. At least, how old is God? Good. I'm cool with good. But you can tell me at least how old he is. He's at least as old as the universe, right? Cool. How old is the universe? No, actually, we know this. There's actually a real number.
Goes up
Some
all the
people
time.
will say it's been around for 5,000 years. But let us go beyond that, okay? The actual correct, measured by redshift and all that sort of stuff like that, is 13.8 billion years since the Big Bang. Smart, right? Scientists can tell us that. So, look, I've got no idea how old God is. But I can tell you he's at least 13.8 billion years old. How long has mankind as a species been around? Roughly 1 million years. When we crawled out of the water and all that sort of stuff. 1 million years. And do we continue to evolve?
Yes.
You got an appendix?
Yes.
What are you using that for? Nothing. Right? You got a vestigial tail? Well, some of us do, but that's just the Kardashian family. We don't talk about that, do we? Okay, anyway. So we change, and we actually, over a relatively short period of time, we've changed a lot. How you doing at breathing underwater? Oh, not so good? Sorry about that. Guess those gills went away pretty quickly, eh? So God's been around for at least 13.8 billion years. Now, I'm not saying that God's evolving, but if he was, is he going to look anything like us? So here's an interesting question. Does God have eyes? I mean, he does in the paintings. It'd be sort of freaky if he didn't, right? But does God have eyes? No. From an engineering point of view, no. Why would God need eyes? We developed eyes so we could detect if there was something in our environment that was going to eat us, right? You know, that's the genetic stuff like that. And we have, oh, by the way, what, visible spectrum we can pick up? Can we pick up infrared? No, unless you're in a superhero movie, right? So there's only a small bath of the spectrum that we can actually detect with our eyes. And by the way, we can only see so far, right? They work well for us. We appreciate our eyes. Thank you very much. But you think God, the infinite creator of all things, has eyes? No, he doesn't need them. Okay, does God have ears? No! What? So compressed air traveling through a medium, God has to listen to stuff? Heck no. Now let's keep going. So does he have a nose? Does he have a mouth? Does he have 2 arms? Does he have 2 legs? Arguably, no. He's got none of that stuff because he or she doesn't need it, right? Oh, by the way, does God have a gender? Well, you need a gender if you're going to be reproduced, right? Infinite God created everything. Doesn't really sort of sound like he needs a mate, right? He's sort of like everything. So God probably doesn't have a gender. Does God have a belly button? That was a trick question. So now we know maybe not what God looks like, but boy, we got a better idea of what God sure as heck doesn't look like. If you just want to use a little bit of science on this, right? Now we're taught that God is everywhere all the time. Does this sound like a familiar story? Can you do bad stuff and God doesn't know about it? No, because he's always there, right? How the heck's that happening? He's everywhere all the time and knows everything that's going on? What kind of fairy tales have you guys been listening to? Well, how could that possibly, assuming that that's true, how could that be? What form would God have to take? Interesting question, right? Is God bigger than the universe? There you go. Now your mind should start wrapping around itself. Well, we think, yes. That means what, multiple universes? I don't know. But maybe there was a before universe and an after universe and he's still around. Okay, let's stick around with that one. So the way I view God's role in this universe is think about yourself in a room. And the room's completely dark. And I mean totally dark. There is no light in that room. Okay, can you picture this? Think about the room right next door. I'm going to put every light that's ever been invented in that room. I'm going to turn it on. Super bright. Now what I'm going to do is take a very small needle and I'm going to poke a little hole in the wall. What's going to happen in your room? It's going to be a ton of light coming through that. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot, but it's going to look like the brightest thing in the whole wide world to you, right? See, I view that as being God's role in our universe. He doesn't have to be here the whole thing. Just a little bit of him and we're good to go. So my view of God, he's got to be energy. Right? God's got to be energy. If he's everywhere all the time, he's got to be energy. Would that, if he was energy, would he be inside you right now?
Yes.
Would he be inside of everything? Hey, you want a tricky one? Would he have been inside Hitler, Stalin, Genghis Khan, Ted Bundy?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
What kind of God are you praying to? All right, so that's all good stuff. All right, I want to leave you with one final thought. So they say that God should be a part of our life. He should be a part of our everyday life. Cool. Where is God in this room? Everywhere? Cool, look at God. Doesn't that seem sort of like ineffective? So I think I got this one figured out. I know where God is in this room. And once again, it's the engineer in me that made this decision. So I got to decide where God is in the room. And I've decided God lives in the corners. So the next time you walk into a room, I want you to look up into the corner. Because up in the corner is where God is. So if you need to look at God, good news. He's there. The only thing that's going to screw this up is if you go into a rounded room, but then you can say he's everywhere, right? We go with that one. But every room you go into for the rest of your life that has a corner, I want you to look in that corner and go, hey, how's it going? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jim, for